What happens when a pro snowboarder discovers that chasing waves that don't exist yet is the key to sustainable business?
So there was these magazines with BMX and then later surfing, skateboarding, and somehow this signaled for me some kind of freedom that wasn't around my neighborhood at that time. So for me, it was actually the full start of becoming like an entrepreneur at the very early age.
Oliver Brunschwiler thought he had cracked the code of modern organizations, but when idealism met reality,
I tried with Holacracy and I love it as a concept, but we failed miserably at doing it.
that failure led to a breakthrough that's reshaping how companies lead with impact.
Purpose is boss, which is actually a good thing, because if you can measure the impact of the purpose on a strategy with the right KPIs behind, it's actually boss. So you don't need a boss.
You need leadership, because in a world where resources are running out, there's no time left for half measures.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, resources are finite, so not infinite. It's just this gap where before it kind of has to take off, because there's no other way around.
So how do you spot the opportunities others can't see coming?
I'm still looking for those people that are like really not catching the wave, but catching the wave that isn't there yet.
Discover how freestyle thinking becomes circular innovation. This is the EUVC Podcast.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the EUVC Podcast. Today, we are exploring the real-world struggles and breakthroughs of circular innovation, long-term systems thinking, and value-aligned leadership, not through brand names, but through principles, frameworks, and lived experiences. In this episode, I have brought my dear friend Enrique from Chi Impact to co-host this episode, and we are talking together with Oliver Brunschwiler, and I might be pronouncing that name terribly, but I'm doing my best to uphold the European heritage here. He's a purpose-driven entrepreneur, systems thinker, and former pro snowboarder who's helped redesign how organizations work from the inside out, always with impact at the center. Enrique, tell me, why did you, or tell the audience maybe, why did you think that it's such an important person to bring on the podcast?
Thank you for that beautiful introduction, Andreas. Always a pleasure to be here with you. So who else to speak about systemic change than someone who has been a professional snowboarder, a real leader in so many companies, a voice for everything that is moving the needle towards a more circular economy and impact in terms of businesses. I mean, I can really just define a few things, but I think Oli is all of that. And it's a very inspirational person for me because of that, like sports mixing the leadership and his personal approach on this. I think I would just let Oli to explain a little bit more about his life and career.
Thank you for the beautiful introduction, both of you. Also, I already feel a little bit like in India on a cloud and surfing, but I'm actually constantly in doubt of myself, so it really feels good to have an intro like this. So thank you very much again. Of course, this is not the truth and not the reality.
Well,
When I teach or when I educate elderly students, I always talk about the failures mainly to get some honest feedback from them too, because usually we tend to talk about our successes. And I really like to talk about the opposite with also usually people that are successful, and that's for me more interesting. So we can maybe focus on that a little more. It depends on what the goal of your podcast will be today.
snowboarding, what has that given you to, like, snowboarding at a pro level, of course? What has that given you as an individual walking into a very successful career in business life afterwards?
Well, first of all, it still gives me a lot of goosebumps. All kind of sports give me goosebumps. So I'm still into it. I'm like an older guy, but I'm consider myself pretty fit still. I still surf. I still snowboard a lot. Sometimes I skate, even though that's getting harder because when you fall, it's really hard for a 55-year-old. So, I mean, it started everything actually. So when my father died when I was 8 years old, I wasn't like a lost guy. We were like in a safe place. My mother was looking after us and everything. I kind of also felt in some kind of a trap. So there was these magazines with BMX and then later surfing, skateboarding, and somehow this signaled for me some kind of freedom that wasn't around my neighborhood at that time. For me, it was actually the full start of becoming like an entrepreneur at the very early age after my career, which actually never stopped. So as a surfer, I mean, I don't know if you know, you actually never stop. So it just stays and sticks with you. You always stay like a child and you go out and play. So I'm still in this mood.
Working with people that have that experience in life is really interesting and also very influential, right? Like, so because last weekend I was doing this tour of the Lake Le Mans, which is 176 kilometers. I want to make the number because it was 5 hours and a half on the bicycle, and it's extremely intense for people in general, right? Like there is a lot of professionals, which is nothing, but for me it was a thing. But when you get your body to those levels and that you have this flow, the understanding about leadership, like following people, understanding ways of working as a group, and resilience is so important. And I think it recalls a lot when I really try to develop some guidance for the investments that we made. I always try to recall to people like him, right? Like, look at this kind of person, how he developed these and this and that. And now, like, being a professor at the IND, at St. Gallen, University of St. Gallen, it really, it's really someone that looks after people that are learning new things. And maybe that's the one of the key elements of like getting to those levels.
Yeah, I mean, in general, it's, like as a freestyler, you're always looking for the next thing that didn't exist before. So I have huge respect for all athletes, especially also from your generation, which are a little bit younger. But we were like these kind of athletes. I mean, I was, when the weather was bad, there was a World Cup in Canada. I was laying in a hotel and smoking pot and watching TV. So, and then you wait for the next morning to perform. So, and today I have huge respect. I mean, this completely different level also. Endurance, cycling, or whatever you say, it said just before, this is a completely different area of sports. In our time, it was like discovering the next thing. So when I look, I mean, if you want to cross the bridge into investments now, when I look into people, of course, you invest more than 50% into people, right? I've probably heard that many times even in this podcast. I don't know. I haven't heard all of them, but some of them. So really good. I was always looking also for entrepreneurial people. I'm still looking for those people that are like really not catching the wave, but catching the wave that isn't there yet. So, and this is not high art. This is just somehow, the undiscovered is more fun than the discovered. So for some people, they consider that as a danger, as an adventure, and for me, it's just like, it's like the obvious that you want to do something, first track in snow, there's nothing else, you want to have the first track. Everybody wants to have the first track. So then that's why Japan and all these places are so full now of people, because everybody wants to be first now, And in my time, there wasn't this need. Everybody want to do that. So yeah, there's a mass of people that actually want to be first liners these days, and how to discover the people that are really talented, not just to have the first line, but to make it beautiful, to really make it nice, look nice, because surfing, snowboarding is all about style. It's not about pure performance, athleticism or so. So I have huge respect for people that go first line and look great while they do it.
I'd love to ask you something, because I know you're big into holacratic systems, which of course is an alternative to traditional top-down management, meaning that you try and distribute authority and decision-making across self-organizing teams. It's a bit funny because I've been thinking about growing EUVC as what I call a platform to enable micro-entrepreneurs in the venture space, because I honestly don't, it's probably driven both by what I think is most powerful in our industry. But then it's also very much driven by the fact that I hate management. I really do not thrive in it. And I don't think that the people that deliver the most value should be in a system where you're what you would call it, modus operandi is management, because because management is almost by definition terrible. I'd love to ask you, how do you think about this in the startup world and bridging the gap into enterprise as well? Because the beautiful thing about a small startup is, of course, that it is quite distributed and non-centralized. But at the same time, it gets very difficult as you scale.
Holacracy was like one base of new work or new kinds of organizations, agile organizations at that time. And it was, for me, very inspirational. And also when we shifted the Freitag from a traditional management system to a agile role-based system, it was actually a very hard time for some people, because the misunderstanding or the interpretation of what this means from a cultural behavior perspective was really different for some people. But it was a good match for Freitag at that time, because also the founders, they were never into, managing their own company. They were creatives. And so they wanted to have actually the best ideas will win and will drive our company forward. And so we tried different things before we actually shifted to Holacracy. And Holacracy actually was the starting point for me also to consult other companies in shifting into role-based organizations, which I also do today in my board role. So usually I have this focus in transforming the organization into a hierarchy or a hierarchy of the competences-based organization form. And that's actually usually for most startups, not just startups, for younger organizations, it's a very good fit, because people feel comfortable when they actually can change their hats from role to role, because you're not like, you have a given job description. After 2 months, it's actually gone. In most organizations, if you get that in an organization today, the organization is doomed, in my view. So you have to adapt to the constantly growing or changing competencies of people. And that's why I have role-based organizations. Even as a CEO today, a lot of people call people CEOs. And usually, but CEOs are not like the CEOs we used to have, because they have different competencies in different roles. And I also had this. So I had different interests, and I was a constant learner. In my highest time at Freitag, I had like 17 different roles. But one was also like apostle. Apostle was like the guy that could talk to you in a podcast. So the video spokesman is an apostle, but there were like 10 people assigned to this role, because they could talk in the name of their company to media, giving speeches, whatever. So it wasn't like only the CEO that could do that. It was the people that had the competence to do that. And that's what I'm driving in most organizations from day one, when we not just invest, but also when we like consult or so. It's what I see in most younger companies as a very future-proof model.
I just need to give my 2 cents on this, because I try with the Holacracy and I love it as a concept, but we fail miserably at doing it, right? Like, it was actually on a roll years back, and I love the team. It's amazing. It's the Impact Hub network, and we work in this Holacracy way of thinking and system. But the challenge on the implementation was the discipline to keep the role model, to own that at the time where the meeting or the moment to show the results was happening.
Yeah. The ideologists, they wanted to get rid of leadership, and that didn't work at the beginning. So you can't get rid of leadership, right? So today we teach purpose-led organizations. So purpose is boss, which is actually a good thing, because if you can measure the impact of the purpose on a strategy with the right KPIs behind, it's actually boss, So you don't need a boss or the bosses. You need leadership. Leadership, people that lead and have this competence or this drive or this talent, to actually inspire and communicate and create trust in a company, they lead. And you give them the role of leadership. But whatever you name it, it's something that is you cannot delete. And at the beginning, people, when they heard, oh, Holacracy, Sociocracy, we don't need our boss anymore. They wanted to get rid of their boss. They gave all the power to the organization, and they completely failed because there was no more leadership. Like, I mean, I know some organizations, also taller organizations, bigger organizations, I'm also part of, that failed with such models. Absolutely. So it's a constant development, but what sticks is purpose-led and role-based organizations.
Yeah, I'm gonna take that as a new norm. You know, like leadership and purpose is definitely, I think, a great way to continue on these roles and to implement them. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I'm sitting here reflecting a ton, because thinking about what am I seeing across the spectrum. Also, if we then think about how AI is changing everything, it's allowing everyone to do more people's work, so to say, in output at least, and making everyone a bit of a manager of agentic systems for you. What I am seeing, both when I look at the distributed organization, or whatever we might want to call it, and also with the adoption of AI, is that there are people that to me seem either cut out for it or at a place in life, an ambition where it's well aligned with them. And then there are people that kind of want to go to work and, do the thing that they're asked to do, and don't want to take ownership in the same way.
Correct.
How do you deal with this?
So this is what I meant with you cannot delete leadership. What does leadership do? I think, first of all, it gives orientation. Some organizations call it strategy. Where does the ship go? And communicate this in a constant manner to why do we do that and how could we do that? And so this is leadership orientation, giving orientation. And at the bottom of leadership is giving safety and secureness to an organization, to people in an organization. But everything between, like solving decision-making or creating, a room for decision-making, is not specifically leadership. You can distribute that, or a lot of those tasks from historically leadership, into different people that can do that much better. But what you cannot delete is giving safety and security. So some people in some organizations need a lot of that. They want to exactly know what they have to do and when they have to do and for how much they have to do it. They need this like clear orientation. And orientation for some people is at the opposite, not necessary, because they see the purpose, they see the strategy, and they don't need anyone to inspire them on a daily basis or give them the security to do their job, because they're self-organized. And a self-organized organization usually have a specific high level of trust in there. Because people, it's not about the failure, it's about there is clear orientation. We know everything, everybody knows where to go. So, and everybody has this specific role. If the tensions arise, we have a system to solve them. But not the boss and not the CEO and not the leadership has to solve it specifically. Modern teams, as you all know, younger organizations, they have methods to solve their tensions. It's not, not leadership has to do it. But I absolutely give you right. But you're right. With some people, also I had that with Freitag, there was like a production, it's a factory, in Zurich. So there's like a couple hundred people working in the factory. And some people, they don't work there for purpose. They work there for money to feed their kids. Yeah. It's not just factory work people, it's also different people. And you have to accept, they don't see like the overarching reason, the cultural benefit they get from working at Freitag or at another company, which is purpose-driven. So give them their orientation, what they need, adapt to them, and not the opposite. They have to adapt to your culturally purpose-led company. You have to adapt to that.
I'd love to shift the conversation a bit, because I want to talk about circularity as well. And I want to try and go a bit beyond the hype, because it is very much which ecosystem you're in. Some would say it's overhyped and you hear about it all the time. That's one echo chamber. Another echo chamber would say that, well, the hype, it's already gone. Trump killed that on day one. So I'd love to ask you, first and foremost, both of you, just to restate, where do you see circularity being today? How do you think about circularity? And then after that, we can dive a bit into the tensions of it.
Circularity, yes, indeed, is right now a controversy, right? Like, so there is multiple ways to see it. Like, what is happening in the West and what is happening in Europe, it's completely different. One of the key elements of how to see it is the way to proceed in terms of businesses that are more connected to giving back to the customer and also to respect the planet somehow. It is challenging to be completely circular, that's for sure. However, the system of circularity allows companies to actually be part of the giving back and forth, and reconnect with the end life cycle of a product, or create a new service on it. Especially in Europe, where we have different cultures and different languages, it really helps people to reconnect with the meaning of production, reconnect with new ways of thinking. Also is part of systemic changing. So, I think we have an opportunity more than a challenge, and we can see it also at the European Union level. Legislation is changing and adapting to that, and being more strict in terms of production with circularity, with intention to take back the products that we are creating. It's not just about like putting there in the market and then at the end, these clothes, whatever you are wearing, it's going to end up in a beach somewhere unfortunately in Africa. It's going to be something that you can reuse or at least utilize it for a different type of concept. We are still in the beginning of circularity, and there is multiple ways that we're going to see circularity thriving.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, resources are finite, so not infinite. It's just currently, it's like, I always compare it like if your stock is down, and it's the same with all sustainability topics. Currently, it's just a low stock, and you stick with it. So, yeah, because you can kind of reverse it. Maybe our generation, could say, well, it's not so urgent. It's not getting hotter really, and it's let's stick with the old plan again, and it's more comfortable, than trying out and failing with hundreds of circular business models and startups. But for me, it's just this gap, where you had a trend, and then you have this small gap before it kind of has to take off, because there's no other way around. It's something logic somehow. So.
How do you marry this? Because the dip is very real. Yes, the stock is down, but that also means that you just lost some real value. The people that thought that had their pension money in the company, that's down now. They're wiped out, or they at least it's less than they thought. Or the investors that were meant to come in to help if you're private, might help in the next round, they might be now saying, well, that's not. So how do you kind of solve this practical tension between the fact that you can be very mission driven and just say, well, it's going to happen, it's needed, and for that reason, we just need to persevere. And on the other hand, you also have to reconcile with the market incentives and operational realities.
I don't consider it that worse, to be honest. So for me, it's more like a look into the ratio, right? If you invest into deep tech, maybe currently that has a 2 to 10 ratio, 2 to 8 ratio or so. So 2 are successful, 8 not. And in circular, maybe it's 1 to 9. So, but it's still 1 to 9. So I'm not a classic VC or so, but from a VC perspective, that's a good ratio. As long as what I see, some are thriving, so, and I don't know any pension fund that didn't invest into a pure circular or like extremely sustainable fund to have all your pension funds in there. I don't know anybody of that. So they all reduced their risks many years ago. So, they played safe.
So I meant
you know what I mean?
I meant the employees that have considerable stock options in their own company.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, but that's the entrepreneurial risk, So if you buy into your own startup as an employee, I mean, this is entrepreneurial risk. So yeah, it's formal.
How do you both of you see founders lead through this, and how do you lead through it as investors yourselves as well?
The reality is in Europe, we are facing a lack of exits in general, right? Like it's not just the circularity. There is multiple kind of sectors including the investment sector that are missing that moment. And I like this comparison or this analogy that Oliver is making about like having a stock and really speaking about circularity as a type of investment, just as an asset class and as another. Sometimes you need to hold it and just think through it and give as a also as a supporter and having other investments in circularity, young, very young companies. These guys, these CEOs that are starting those new businesses, they really see the value in the long term, especially in let's say marketplaces, right? Like so, or ways to consume products in a different way because of the potential that you can have in the future, right? Like so, if you analyze it on a big picture and you see circularity as a trend that will continue growing, and you see these use of circularity for the take back of production or products in the market, you can see also multiple levels of connection with your customers. Nowadays, customers look for something that is more specific for them, more special. I was on a conference at the IMD actually on luxury. The new luxury is actually to have a specific, not just retreats, but a specific moments, like emotions that will actually drive the customer to invest on that. And that is experiences. Most of the time, what experience means is that someone is going to buy whatever, but to have an experience with that product. From my perspective, and also the experience that I have with these early stage circular economy businesses, they want to create that. They want to see that the customer is actually compromised with what they are offering on the long run. It's a customer that will buy that product multiple times, or that will be able to actually even pay a ticket that is going to be a monthly base or whatever, because they compromise with this same value. It's not for everyone, of course. It's like any other asset class. Not everyone is going to invest in that specific thing. But it has a space, yes, of course, definitely. And then these guys, the early stage ventures, they see these and they look at the trends and the big data of this, and they analyze it from different places. So I think it is something exciting also for them.
How do you, Oliver, see the best founders mobilize both investors and customers and employees around circularity?
Well, when they pitch, depending on their model, but circular models are, of course, usually very cost efficient models, so they use less. They are a driver for innovation, and they are clearly based on regulatory topics that arise. You just said some of them. In Europe, at least, it's driving very fast currently again. Even in Switzerland, it's driving very fast. In the build sector, they just released a new rule in terms of, because 40% of the global CO2 impact is building materials. And then, of course, they show a lot of resilience in these times. So if young people now pitch models to us currently, you see that they're exactly what I said before. They're looking for their first track. They don't have they see a current first track, something that, especially in the fashion industry, the big ones, Inditex and H&M, didn't adapt yet, because they're waiting for the regulator, because it really hurts their business model. So when we see or evaluate now, we see younger entrepreneurs that see a lot of cost efficiency in circular business model, and that really, drives innovation in the whole system. And that's why I'm so positive and not too afraid currently. It's just a matter of how long or how deep or how wide will be the gap, and can you stand it? Can you hold tight? That's the question currently. But in general, for me, it's the method of circular business model is is one way to a thriving planet. So I'm not less motivated than 2 or 3, 4, 5, 10, even when I started was about 15 years ago, to adapt the opportunities of circularity.
Oliver, where are you seeing the biggest opportunities right now? What business models are you seeing?
Food. I see a lot in food, because also from a behavior perspective, you said that before, Enrique, a lot of people don't drink a lot of alcohol anymore. I have friends, they close their nightclubs. I don't know, how about your friends? Because people don't go out a lot anymore and they have a healthier lifestyle. I don't know why that is. It's a huge thing somehow. So people really looking into what they digest. And in the whole food industry, there's a lot of change going on. And the scale, is so fast and can be so big. And that's very interesting to look at. Currently, it's not my focus. Our focus is different. It's in biodiversity, mobility, building, energy, and circular economy as a whole. But there's like upcycling processes we're looking into from the beer brewing industry. There's also a Danish connection. I think you're Danish, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you said the thing with alcohol, I was about to say that I can't count the number of times, and I've done it just today, put something nice in the fridge for my wife and I to drink in the evening when the kids go to bed. But then we never end up drinking it, and it goes back into the shelf.
Really?
And honestly,
Okay.
it's not because we don't end up having a good time. It's just because we don't feel like having a drink anymore. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, see, you're 10 years younger, at least 10 years younger than I, because I have a whole vineyard in the back of my house. So for me, it's a daily routine, the grape.
If you're guessing me to be 10 years younger than you and you're 55, I don't think whatever I'm doing is working. Because I'm 35, so I'm not.
Oh my God. Whoa.
No, I've always thought that I will peak at 42. That's when I think that I'll peak as a person.
Okay, so I see it this way, right? Like circularity is also some of the needs in the market in Europe. It requires investments that are also more industrial, like in a more, let's say, changing the cycle of the product. And I'm gonna give you numbers, right? Like, so there is Librec. Librec is recycling and recovering critical raw materials, and is really one of these companies that requires a lot of capex in the beginning, but then once it already set and put it in place, you can have a lot of solutions that are going around it. So Libric is one of those examples where you see, I mean, let's put it in context, right? Like the EEV, so electric vehicles industry is going to continue growing, right? Like, so you see it from the West, you see it from the East. So the Chinese are going to continue growing a lot that sector. Europeans are doing the same. So nowadays, Porsche is having the whole new fleets are completely electric, and all the other ones too. Volkswagen, everyone is doing it. So there is an increase of these. The batteries that are going to be using need to have a process of recycling, right? Like, so they already have some stuff, but with solutions like Librec, the big number of batteries and the critical mass like lithium, nickel, cobalt, you can really reintroduce them in the supply chain. So those kind of things that nowadays we are all saying like, oh yeah, it is too early for those things, and I mean it creates more complications than before. No, it's the way to use it, right? Like, so industrializing these things in a circular way is what we are looking for. And then there is another one, right? Depoly. Depoly is very interesting also business because they do with a room temperature and a chemical recycling process. They break down the PET for reusing it for new materials. So for packaging, for textiles, for bottles, for many other different things. So this kind of new industries, because what they're creating is a new way to reutilize those materials, is what we're going to look for in the future, right? Like, so a full systemic change on the way we are producing things.
Where are you both seeing corporates come into this play? Because obviously, every time we talk about supply chains and changing how things are made, it's oftentimes something that needs to be adopted by the large players. Could you talk to me a bit about the movement that's happening?
Yeah, that's interesting. I was looking into Fairphone. I mean, that's something that is on the market, I don't know, for 15 years or so. I don't know. What they did is, interestingly, they have a strong focus on social and environmental impact, but they paid 1 million in living wage bonuses to supply chain workers. So not to their own companies, in integrating them to into their success because they're growing, So it was always kind of a sleeper, but they're growing, and I'm quite sure there will be, for example, be swallowed by some. Some will really like adapt a lot of their designs in terms of supply design chain. So I'm quite sure like there is inspirational, smaller companies that will grow into something and inspire bigger ones. So Fairphone for me was really interesting. And they also, what the problem was, it's fully designed for disassembly, right? So it's electronics, one big waste topic, in the world. And they had a high price instead, like of $700 or so. They want to price them more accessibly into like half of it. So it was really like they're making interesting moves to scale on another level.
I'd love to ask both of you before we close, just a question about the European Union, so to say, and the movements that we're making in Europe, because we have always been at the forefront of pushing forward both climate and impact, but also circularity in particular. I'd love to ask you, what are you seeing happening that's important? Where are you seeing that we should be trying to force or at least incentivize our politicians to be moving quicker?
One of the motors of the economy in Europe, and it's linked to what we're discussing, is the automotive industry, right? Like, so I think that there should be more going to the EV and the electric vehicles, and how we push forward to have a full control on the reusability of all the materials that are part of that more clean energy products. I think consumer goods, like everything that you consume, like the toothpaste, like the things that in general we are buying, and that normally there is now multiple stores in all Europe that sell you like peels for toothbrush, like you put it in your mouth and then you don't need the plastic, yeah, they sell these on some glass or something like this, or places where you go and you reuse your packaging for getting your coffee, or for the coffee that you're going to make at home, or getting your grains, whatever you eat, like whatever you are going to consume as in a regular base at home. It is part of what every consumer should be aware and said, like, yes, I mean, if I can reduce the number of plastic that I use when I put cream in my body, when I use a toothbrush, when I use like different elements that you use in a daily base multiple times, I think that's where there is action. When we all said, like, yes, we need to push forward to a regulation to come, and also to have our own needs, right? Like sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to buy those, or to do an extra effort for reusing that cup, or reducing whatever you are using for getting your goods. But it makes sense in the long run. So I think it's a compromise for everyone, right? And we need to push for those regulations.
Precisely, it's they started 2020, I think, or 2021 with the Circular Economy Action Plan. They call it in the EU Green Deal. So, and that was like, well, for all industries like textiles, electronic, batteries, packaging, food system. And, it was based on this make, use, return, life cycle index. So, and now we have a new one, right to repair directive. So that's a directive. So that means manufacturers have to offer, I think, services and spare parts for up to 10 years. which wasn't there yet. I mean, there's some brands like Remova and, all the, which they actually do eternal products, but it wasn't there. So it's a directive. So we really have to make sure that like your smartphone, your washing machine, your vacuum cleaner has follows the right to repair directive. So that's a huge driver for me. And then there's, I think, the eco design for sustainable products regulation, ESP something, but it's not a directive. So I'm not sure if the digital product passport is a directive. I don't know, I should have Google. And if that is like a directive, or if that gets like a real regulation, then that means your products are like traceable. So everything that discloses material content, origin, CO2 footprint is part of your digital product passport. And that's a huge driver, not in the food systems, but packaging, construction, electronics, even textiles. If that will apply, and not just the EU will apply, but also like China, which is actually pretty forward in that sense, we have more sleeping circular business models and startups that could be strongly come into a growth phase. But so there is some regulatory drive that will maybe also narrow the gap which we're in currently. And then, of course, there's CSRD, which kind of was pushed back by Omnibus. But in general, CSRD is still in place. So that also includes the use of resource waste and circularity, value chain sustainability. And so there's actually a couple of drivers. And then there's specific in countries, even stronger ones. I think France has an anti-waste law for circular economy, but that's an older one. I don't know if that's in place. And then there's Germany with closed waste substance management, waste management act, something. So that means you have to prevent things that get into waste. So yeah. And then of course the US is a patchwork currently. Not all is deleted, by the way. Some states have still their rules in place. So I'm not afraid of the US. They will come back.
It's an incredible time to be an inventor and of course also an impact in circularity. Enrique, Oliver, thank you so much for both of you coming here on the podcast today.
Thank you very much.
Pressure. Thank you very much.
Love you, Scarf.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.